a community, a society. Its origins lie somewhere deep in the misty past. It can be a belief or a practice that's imbued with special meaning and significance, and it remains alive in the present. Why are traditions significant? Some would say they're like the algorithms of our lives. They formulate the pattern of our habits and our behaviors. By following them, we can act in ways that are understood and appreciated by the people around us, because we share a common view, a common custom, a common calendar of practices. And by conforming to these tried and accepted ways, there's the special satisfaction gained in fulfilling the clear and set patterns. Language is a tradition. Words were bequeathed to us by our long-dead ancestors. The origin of language is a mystery that linguists are still trying to uncover. And we communicate by conforming to rules of syntax, structure, vocabulary, intonation, phonation. This traditional manner of noise-making will successfully enable you to pass information to your colleagues, enable you to collaborate. How but for this long tradition would we know the names of things? As with language, a great deal about our lives is regulated by long-enduring institutions with rules inherited from the deep past. The word tradition derives from the Latin word tradere, which means to transmit, to hand over, to entrust for safekeeping. And so it is, what we call a tradition is something that's specially hallowed and respected. We say, that's a tradition around here. We always begin with opening words. That's our tradition. We always bury our dead before the second sundown. That's our tradition. We always wait for Dad to first say, let's eat. Or as Teddy explained in Fiddler on the Roof, who has the right as master of the house to have the final word at home? The Papa. Tradition. Some traditions go on forever. In this Easter season, we might remember that the celebration of Easter goes back way before the Christian era. Easter was the Germanic pagan goddess of fertility of the East. She was the deity for spring. She was customarily represented by the symbols of fertility, the egg and the bunny rabbit, right? That practice persists to this day. It survived the overlay of an entirely new mythology, but it persists intact within the tradition structure. It still satisfies as a symbol of spring's renewal and rebirth after a long, cold winter. Tradition sometimes simply refers to the way things have always been. In daily life, there may be practices of childcare, of cooking passed down from parent to child. In law courts, where tradition goes on long after something is forgotten in other spheres of life, no one remembers why the British wear wigs. They still do. And while we're talking about the law, the practice of referring to legal precedents is sometimes just a ruse to support a new legal argument by calling upon some old case and just saying, that's proof that we always did it like this. Well, back to the story about the trip to the forest. After the old man died, the tradition was left in the hands of his children. In later years, that next generation would go into the forest on the 5-year anniversaries and find the old gnarled tree. The second generation, now aging in its own right, would bring a bone, well, any bone that was available. They brought a turkey feather, because it was easier to find than a hawk feather, and a twig of leaves. They would recite the blessing, which now took only a minute, with each brother or sister calling out the parts that they remembered. Well, from one telling of this story, one might stress how the second generation forgot many of the details of the ceremony that the old man had originally performed. The practice was becoming simplified, thinner, and shallower, and elements were being lost which had furnished the original ceremony with charm and perhaps its magically significant aspects. By saying something is traditional, we instill it with prestige, respect, reverence. This is the time-honored way as opposed to the more prosaic and shallow practice of current day. There's something wood-paneled, mahogany-colored, richly grained about tradition. It does not have to be vouched for. It's self-referential. It's inherently worthy. Why are we concerned about tradition? Traditional practices do seem to have an effect on the spirit. To be linked with the past generations is to be anchored. To know your family and to reach across the years is to experience deep time. To respect one's forebears is to respect life itself. Keeping alive the memory of our ancestors is to assure their immortality. It's through shared practices and traditions that we touch the generations past and hope that our own lives will somehow resonate into the future as well. There is research that correlates religiosity with well-being, but it's interesting that the aspect of religion that supports this is the strength of the